Some apps feel incredibly responsive. You click something and it updates instantly. No loading, no waiting, it just happens. Let's see how this works in React. So what's actually happening here? You click something and it updates right away. Or you send a message or post a comment and it shows up immediately, without any loading state. That's what optimistic updates are about. Instead of waiting for the server, we reflect the result in the UI right away, as if everything already worked. Then in the background, we send the request and sync with the server. If something goes wrong, we revert the UI and can optionally show an error. In practice though, this works really well, because most requests just succeed. Now this idea isn't new, but before React 19, implementing it wasn't exactly simple. We had to manage optimistic state ourselves. That usually meant duplicating state, one version for the real data and one for the optimistic UI. Then keeping them in sync, and handling rollback logic if something failed. It works, but adds complexity, and it's easy to get wrong. That's why many applications relied on libraries like 10-stack query to handle this. With React 19, this gets much simpler. Optimistic updates are now supported as part of the new actions model. React provides a hook called useOptimistic, which lets us show an optimistic version of the state while an action is still in progress. So when a user triggers an action, like submitting a form or saving changes, we can update the UI immediately, without waiting for the request to finish. Once the action completes, React switches back to the actual state. If the request succeeds, the actual state usually updates to the final result. If it fails, the actual state stays the same, so the UI falls back to the previous value. Now that we understand the idea, let's see how this works in practice. Here's a simple post page with likes and comments. You can like or unlike the post, add comments, and remove your own comments. Right now, this version doesn't use optimistic updates, so every interaction waits for the request to finish before the UI updates. So if I click like, there's a short delay before the change appears. In the next steps, we'll add optimistic updates to both likes and comments and make these interactions feel instant. Let's start with the like button. I'll import useOptimistic from React. Now let's create an optimistic version of our state. useOptimistic is used a lot like useState. We pass in the current value, and it gives us the optimistic version of that state, along with the function to update it. We could manage isLiked and liked separately, something like this. But since these values always change together, it's simpler to combine them into a single state object. So instead, we'll keep them in one optimistic state. Now, inside the click handler, we create the next optimistic value first. Then inside start transition, we call the useOptimistic update function with that value. This way, the UI reflects the change right away, while the request is still in progress. And in the component, we use the optimistic values instead of the regular state. We also don't need a separate pending state anymore, because the UI updates right away. Let's try it. I click the like button, and it updates instantly. Now let's also simulate a failure. If we look at the toggle like function, we can set failure config.like to true to simulate a failure. So now, if I click the button again, it still updates immediately, but after a short delay, it falls back to the previous state. That happens because the request failed and the real state never changed. So we still get instant feedback while keeping the UI consistent with the actual data. Now let's move on to comments. This time we'll use a slightly more advanced version of useOptimistic the one that takes a reducer as the second argument. This gives us an optimistic version of the comments along with the dispatch function. So we can update the optimistic state by dispatching actions. Next, let's define the reducer above the component. For now, we'll just handle adding a new comment. When we dispatch an add action, we return a new list with the new comment appended. We'll also define the comment action type for that. Now, right before we send the request to add a comment, we dispatch the add action. This updates the optimistic state immediately, so the comment appears in the list right away. And in the UI, we'll use optimistic comments instead of the regular comments. Next, let's also improve the form behavior. Right now, it stays in a pending state, but we don't really need that anymore. So we'll remove the pending state from the submit button, and I also want to clear the form right after submission. Since this is an uncontrolled input, we can just reset the form using a ref. Let's try it. I type a comment and submit, and it appears in the list immediately. The form is cleared and ready for the next comment. Now let's simulate a failure. We can set failure config.addComment to true. So now when I submit a comment, it still appears right away, but after a short delay it disappears and we show an error. So again, we get instant feedback while still handling failures correctly. Now let's say we still want to indicate that a comment is pending. We can do that by adding a pending flag to the optimistic comment. So we extend the comment type with an optional pending property. Then in the reducer, when we add a new comment, we set pending to true. Now in the comment item component, we can use that flag to style the component differently. For example, we can make it slightly transparent and show a pending icon. So now when we add a comment, it appears immediately with the pending style, and once the request completes, it becomes a normal comment. Finally, let's also handle removing comments. Since we already have the reducer, this is pretty straightforward. We add the remove action to the action type, then we handle it in the reducer by filtering out the comment, and dispatch that action right away when we start the request. Let's try it. I delete a comment, and it disappears immediately. If the request fails, it comes right back to the list. Alright, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.